This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you very much for tuning into the program. It's Wednesday, January the 7th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly. David Williams, he's produced the program. If you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial to get in the queue and on the air is 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. So I've been asked repeatedly, why not a little bit of love for the Newfoundland Regiment playing in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League? Fair enough, let's do it. One thing I did notice over the Christmas holidays, well, for starters, they're fourth place in the Eastern Conference, playing pretty well. And they were super active over the holiday season, acquiring new players. Just acquired the top scorer, Alexis Michaud from Baie-Comeau Drakkar, and they've added a bunch of guys. So good on the Regiment. Hopefully they have a stellar second half of the season. But someone asked me, why not some love for the Reg? There you go. All right, so 'tis the season, some pretty messy weather in the offing. So, it's the gentle reminders that if your property has a storm drain out in front, maybe it's a good opportunity today to chip away some of the ice off of it, because it looks like a lot of rain coming, a lot of high winds, so it could be pretty messy. The only part of the province to be spared of this winter rainy storm, Labrador apparently. So anyway, there you go. And on this snow business, it's unbelievable how many emails we get about 24/7 snow clearing. The vast majority of them are coming from people who live around one of the routes that were not named in the first 14 for the new, yet to be fully applied 24/7 snow clearing. The immediate concern was whether or not they're going to be able to hire enough operators. We were told that there was a pretty steady flow of applications coming in and people being vetted through the process, but they're having a hard time here apparently in the most eastern regions of the province. And so what is that? Right off the bat, we had people sending us emails talking about the rate of pay of Fortitude snowplow operators or salt truck drivers as it pertains to working for St. John's or Mount Pearl or Paradise or CBS, and it looked like they were paying a little bit better than the province. So when we talk about 25 permanent jobs and 25 part-time jobs in this, what they call an expanded 24/7 snow clearing, not so sure we're there yet, but I hear a lot about it, and obviously and rightfully so. All right, stick with some other stuff here. So apparently 2025 was a banner year for the cruise ship industry. Okay, I guess that's a good thing, right? So more than 100,000 people visited the province by cruise last year. So 180 cruise ships made port of call across 24 destinations. Generally speaking, most people think about St. Anthony, St. John's and Corner Brook, but apparently they started making stops after certification by Transport Canada and the Canada Border Services Agency to Trinity and to Bonavista. Obviously a good thing. It would be interesting to know what the exact or somewhere close to the exact or precise economic impact that brings to town. Of course it brings some. Of course it does. People get off the ship and they spend some money doing whatever they're doing. But it'd be nice to know exactly what kind of impact that actually brings to the communities where the ports of call. On top of that, it would be also interesting. I don't know how this process could work, because the real impact, if they liked it here, maybe they consider to return here and not via cruise ship, but to fly here or to take Marine Atlantic, whatever the case may be, and stay for an extended amount of time where they would spend some real money. So go down the ports of call that have seen some cruise action, but it would be interesting, I think, to also include what that economic impact actually looks like. Anyway, Marine Atlantic, we knew that they were out looking around for a charter vessel. Now they've struck a 5-year lease arrangement with an outfit called Stena Roro. All right, so the new vessel, the A. Nepeta, is virtually the same capacity, amenities and size as the Highlanders, Blue Petite and the Alasunu. It won't be ready for the peak tourism season this year. And the one question being asked, because I see it portrayed as adding capacity, but is it actually going to add any capacity? The Leif Erikson, which is one of the flagships, the oldest ship in the fleet, it's been on the water since 2001. And there are some questions about the lifespan for the Leif Erikson. So it's probably a very good thing, obviously, to, as opposed to build one, to actually lease one that has the capacity we require. But are we actually adding to, or are we simply replacing the Leif Erikson is a question I would have. I guess in the coming months, after training is finished and the paint job applied to this newly chartered 5-year leased vessel, we'll find out more. But that Leif Erikson, it's starting to show its wear and tear, so we'll see what it actually means. A question that people would inevitably ask. Let's just say they can expand or extend the life expectation of the Leif Erikson for 2, 3, 4 years, whatever the case may be. So an actual additional vessel on the runs. You hear the same thing during the summer months frequently from people from this province trying to book passage with Marine Atlantic, but having a problem with the return visit. So let's just say you've got a purpose-specific trip to, pick one, Halifax. So you book passage over because you're going to a wedding or you're going for golf or whatever you're doing, and then just to be told, trying to book passage back, that it's weeks after you need to be back. So if there was actually an additional vessel on the runs, would there be some opportunity for some sort of priority system to be given to people from this province? I don't know if that's actually a good thing or a bad thing, but we hear those types of requests all the time. Of course, you have to prioritize commercial traffic that holds the perishable goods and what have you, but would an additional vessel actually ease some of the concerns that the passenger traffic have from this province? We know last summer there was a 50% cut in the passenger fee. Commercial traffic was frozen at their current fee. But I just wonder whether or not that actually adds or simply replaces the Leif Erikson. I don't have the answer, but it'd be interesting to know. All right, for some reason I can't get this particular story out of my mind because it's a big one. And it's the new revelations coming from John Risley about the possibility for Atlantic Canada to be the green energy hub. All right. So it pretty much says the green hydrogen play is dead in the water, at least for now, and for the foreseeable future. But the plans that he's talking about here, in cooperation with the Pattern Energy, which is a subsidiary of the Canada Pension Plan, is pretty significant stuff. Talking about some $75 billion, $16 billion worth of transmission. I don't know where the market will be, but it's got some pretty complicating factors underneath. So already in discussions with Hydro-Quebec, have already put an application in front of the Major Projects Office. So what does that implication with Hydro-Quebec and their need and their thirst for additional power, what does that mean for any potential play or delay signing definitive agreements with Hydro-Quebec regarding the Churchill River? I don't know, but I think we should factor that into the conversation. I'd also be curious as to how looped in the provincial government is here with this particular proposal coming from Mr. Risley and whoever his partners are. They're spending millions of dollars a day already and talking about getting this off the ground sooner than later. We don't know what the feds might do with the Major Project Office application, but I would like to know from the province exactly how looped in they are. Because we already know that the Crown lease that was given to Mr. Risley and World Energy GH2 was very purpose specific. Now with the change in transmission alone, does that not change the conversation? Because the transmission at that point would be turbines on the Port-au-Port Peninsula heading to Stephenville for all the electrolysis, green hydrogen, ammonia and export. But this is different. To find your way to Hydro-Quebec, obviously you have to have the transmission across the island and whatever sort of subsea cables are going to be associated with it. But for context, they're talking about just in phase 1, 5 gigawatts from this province onshore wind, 5 gigawatts from offshore wind at Nova Scotia. Let's just look at the proposal as it stood regarding green hydrogen. The turbines, as we know, if you've seen the turbines up the southern shore or down in Ramia, they're not these turbines. These are absolutely massive, 200-meter tall, taller than the Confederation Building, taller than Signal Hill turbines. The 150 that were proposed by World Energy GH2 could produce around 1 gigawatt. And they're talking about 5 gigawatts. So that's an awful lot of these turbines with an absolutely different set of circumstances regarding transmission. So it's a pretty big story. Is it ever going to get off the ground? I have no idea. People will generally be skeptical on this because the green hydrogen was all the rage. The federal government were talking about it being valued into the trillions. And then they quartered that of their own evaluation. Obviously, the green hydrogen is going nowhere at this moment in time. So I'm not going to be skeptical for the sake of, but I think it's important for the provincial government to give us some sort of update about what this is going to require. Because it can't be just a green light because the environmental assessment was released regarding the former proposal, because this is different. So anyway, you want to talk about it? I think it's a big deal. And I wonder what that means about dealing with Hydro-Quebec, for wind and any possibilities on the Church River. I'm not suggesting by no means that we need to fast track and sign some sort of deal for the sake of it. No, I don't think anybody thinks that. But if there are alternative sources of power that satisfies Hydro-Quebec's needs, how does this dovetail, or how does this work in conjunction with some of the proposals on the Church River? If these wind farms for major power ever comes to fruition. I don't know if anybody at the provincial government would like to chime in on that, but we should talk about it. I heard Rodney Goody from the Paramedics Association on with Jerry Lynn Mackey and Russell Bowers on the morning show today. And it's all, of course, about a story that is not new, but it's about the delays for patient offloading at emergency rooms. And even if we just look at 3 emergency rooms in and around town, in October alone, over 2,100 hours of delays. And the delay clock doesn't even kick in until after 30 minutes after arrival. Rodney Goody's pretty clear on this stuff, and there's not just a simple solution here. It's not just as fundamental as staffing at the ER rooms, because it's also staffing at the hospital beds and every moving part therein. So what do we do here? It's a pretty important question. Mr. Goody's talked about not only is it problematic for the patient, not only does it ripple through the healthcare system, it's also bad for the paramedics because they can't be out on the road doing what they're trained to do. And to use his words, it's absolutely putting lives at risk. One of the key points Mr. Goody also makes is that the absolute need for transparency here. There's no good reason why we can't capture these offload delays every single month, just so that we know when NL Health Services is talking about a plan to ease this particular situation, we have to be able to measure it. It's like everything else here. Plans are good, execution is better, but to be able to measure that execution, whether or not it's satisfactory or it's excellent or it's stagnant, is something that apparently we do not have in place at this moment in time. So, and he also goes on to point out some complicating factors in addition to what I already said is, we're not even exactly sure if an ambulance came from X and has a long delay at an emergency room in St. John's, what that means for that community that may have had their only ambulance sitting in a parking lot at St. John's with a patient on a gurney in the hallway. So some pretty excellent questions being posed by Mr. Goody. And this is not complaining about it for the sake of, because we've had great exercises undertaken regarding the 10-year plan in the health accord, what have you. We need to be able to just understand hitting the milestones, checking the boxes. Are we on the right track? Because if we're not, it's a complicated issue. I'm not going to dare say that, oh, just do this and all's fine and dandy. But just to be able to measure it, I think is a pretty important next step. Your thoughts on it? Then I also heard conversations this morning about the new urgent care facility on Stavanger Drive in the old Costco building. It sounds like a great addition, right? If it's not an emergency, you can get the work done there. For a break or need stitches or some diagnostic services, sounds great. They're going to be operating from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. But here's the next caveat, is they'll be able to extend hours if and when staffing allows. So much of this stuff, it's not just about process or administration. So much of it boils back to the ability to bring staff in and to keep them here, which leads me to the doctor conversation from yesterday. Tom Badcock called, and other people have reiterated his concerns via email about what exactly is going on with the efforts we've made to recruit doctors, let's just say from Ireland, because we did indeed do exactly that. The unfortunate reality is some of those doctors said yes, they came, and then they left. Why? Because of the time it took to certify them, to get their accreditations and their license in place. I don't think we're going to be able to get an answer from the college. Maybe NL Health Services can help us have a better understanding of the approval process. And if it's as slow as it seems to be, given the fact some doctors came and then quickly left, how is it and why is it different from other provinces, where they seem to have been able to get out of their own way and fast-track approvals or accreditations? And we see those stories if you read newspapers from around the country. It seems to be handled differently elsewhere. The question would be, why? And is there something we can do, realistically speaking? And no one's suggesting we don't do due diligence and have doctors working on patients in this province who are not qualified, coming from unaccredited medical schools. No one's saying that. But if you went to Trinity College in Dublin and you graduated as a doctor, maybe, just maybe, we can put them to work sooner than later. Your thoughts? Would be interesting. All right, a couple of quick ones before we get to you. This story here is the epitome of double-edged sword. So there's 3 restaurant owners out in Calgary who had been financially and otherwise abusing temporary foreign workers. They're going to jail. Fascinating stuff. So they've all been sentenced, there's 3 of them, sentenced to 90-day jail terms, serve them on the weekends. They were convicted of fraud over $5,000. So basically, they were lying to the temporary foreign workers about how much the labour market assessment cost and garnishing their wages to pay for it. As opposed to the actual $1,000 it cost, they were charging some of these TFWs as much as $44,000. Oh, no, pardon me, $24,000. In total, $44,000 were built from these TFWs. So good for people who are abusing the temporary foreign worker system and their workers, but it also is a bigger story about why some employers would even bother with falsifying labour market assessments to get approvals for temporary foreign workers, when and if there might indeed be people in their area who are looking for a job and can't get a job. It should be pretty basic to suggest that you should hire local as best possible. If it's impossible, then yeah, there's a reason why that program's in place, even though it's been altered downward pretty dramatically in the last year or so. But abusing the system and abusing the workers, off to prison you go. Nothing wrong with it. If you're simply abusing the system, period, that's also hugely problematic and a big part of the political conversation. But anyway, let's go. All right, I suppose we can't avoid some of the biggest topics in the world. Whether it be what happened and what's going on in Venezuela, which is still a bit of a head-scratcher here. Nothing's pragmatically changed. You remove one person, and the vice president now takes over as the president, as opposed to the opposition leader who actually won the last election. So it's all really quite bizarre. When the Prime Minister was asked about the future of Canadian oil, if there's increased production in Venezuela, his opinion is that we have lower risk, less expensive, lower carbon, and Canadian oil for export should be fine. The vast majority of oil that comes from Alberta heads south into the United States. Plus, we're talking about some period of time before any return to the type of production in Venezuela. Back in 1999, 5 million barrels a day. Now it's about 900,000. So they're a long way from where they once were. So cost, it's very costly and technologically challenging, as we've heard many, many times. So it's that. And I'm not really in the mood for hyperbole on these issues, but, I mean, the conversation regarding Greenland is bonkers. It is. And not because these are words that I'm plucking out of thin air. It's words coming from the American administration. Consideration of military operations. Look, the Americans at one point had dozens of military bases on Greenland, and they closed them all except for one. There's no reason to believe that if it's a strategic national security issue, that they couldn't open more bases on Greenland. I don't think they were ever allowed to have nuclear weapons there, but if that's the issue, then why is the military option in play? And even the concept of purchasing it. And again, people talk about the possibility for military or financial coercion in this country. I don't know. But in Greenland, they're talking about it a lot. It just feels as fundamental as, it's not about critical minerals, because the mining industry will tell you going after those minerals in the permafrost is a nightmare. So I just think it's about the geography, the geographical location. But the ultimate goal here just feels a lot like bringing an end to NATO. I mean, the president has already been on the bully pulpit talking about countries not living up to their 2% of GDP commitment. Now it's all of a sudden 5%. We're going to be spending hundreds of billions of dollars on defense if we ever live up to that 5%. But don't take it from me. Take it from the president. He has, as long back as 1987, been talking about dismantling NATO, taking up full-page ads in major American newspapers about exactly that. If there was ever a military boot on the ground in Greenland, that in essence would either be one of two things: war, my God, or just the obliteration of NATO. And there's no upside to the NATO members other than the United States for that to be the end result. So it's just complete and utter madness what's going on here. It would be really great if we could separate out the cult of personality and kind of drop this left versus right kind of stuff and try to have cold, hard evaluation with serious eyes and some real careful consideration of what's actually going on here, what the implications are short-term, long-term. But we can't seem to get out of our own way and do it. Foreign interference is becoming a bigger problem than it ever was. So in this country, we've got a problem already with the Chinese. We've got a problem with the Russians. And we have a big problem with the Americans, who are no longer trustworthy, which is a mouthful to say. So if we just continue to go down the left versus right, and this is what I voted for, cry more, cope and seethe, all that stuff, boy, oh boy, we are spinning our wheels when I don't think we can afford to do a whole lot of wheel spinning at this moment in time. But how are we doing on the phone there, David? Let's see here. We're on Twitter. We're VOCM Open Line. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. Oh, someone wanted me to throw in the whole purchase of military fighters, fighting jets. I don't know. I mean, I'm not an avionics expert. You know, we've got already an order being satisfied regarding F-35s built by the Americans versus the Swedes talking about the Gripen aircraft and the promising 12,000 jobs to be created in Canada to build the Gripens. People will go back and forth on capabilities and what have you. But that's next big conversation, because we talk about domestic procurement, creation of jobs, being more self-reliant. And yeah. Oh, and I just seen another one float in. What about the pipelines? Okay, good question. What about pipelines? Mr. Poilievre has written an open letter to the Prime Minister demanding that he approve the pipeline proposal immediately and fast-track it. My question on that front is twofold. What pipeline? Who's proposing a pipeline? Are we talking about taxpayer-funded pipeline, or is the private sector actually going to want one built? Currently, there is no proposal, so approval of what? I have no idea. And it is amazing to me that while the Conservatives were in power, they built exactly 0 inches of pipeline to Tidewater. So if it was always important to diversify, and it is, to find newer markets, more reliable markets, absolutely the right path. But they didn't build any pipelines. We all just chipped in on a $33 billion twinning of the Trans Mountain Pipeline. And so fast-track approval of what proposal? There is no proposal. At least not yet. All right, we're taking your emails, openline@vocm.com. When we get back, we're speaking with you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go. Line number 1, Chris, you're on the air.
Oh, hey, Patty, how are you?
Great today. How about you?
Oh, good. I'm just driving at the exact moment, so I don't have my notes in front of me, but I'm glad you brought up John's new plans and ambitions. So obviously we talked a lot about the ammonia thing, and that hasn't gone anywhere, and a lot of people, I think, did see that coming, and the writing was on the wall. So what's the deal with this project now? It's in a lot of ways less dumb than the ammonia play, because the whole transfer of energy from here to Germany through what they proposed was 80% loss or whatever. And so what he's proposing now is not that bad, just in raw numbers, because his first proposal was so absolutely insane. But I think we very reasonably need to ask how credible the numbers he's using are. So let's start with the transmission. The transmission that they're saying they're going to build is only from the edge of Newfoundland heading into Canada. At least on the diagram that they published, it doesn't include any of the transmission between the other wind sites. And so that's sort of this other weird part of the plan, that John is saying we're going to build all this wind and sell this 10 gigawatts. He's not saying how much he is going to build. He even said in the CBC article that he expects the other proponents to drop their wind to ammonia plays and provide wind to this system. And our grid can absolutely not move 5 gigawatts around the island, like nowhere even close. So the infrastructure that would need to be built out is already not being pitched honestly, because he doesn't include any of that additional transmission in his numbers.
Well, additional transmission would be on top of existing transmission, because round numbers, maybe around 2,000 megawatts worth of transmission on the island, somewhere in that neighborhood. If you factor in all of the hydro generation on the island, add in Holyrood, or maybe it's a little bit more than that. So if we're talking about 5 gigawatts, another 5,000 megawatts, that's more than doubling what's already on the island itself. It's a huge implication, which is why I wonder where the province is on this. The approval for World Energy GH2, if we talk about transmission capacity, that pales in comparison to what we're talking about here.
Oh, it's a whole other scale. And sort of that was one of the reasons they were using ammonia, is because ammonia is basically, they were suggesting it's an alternative to power lines. The ammonia is going to be the electrochemical battery that moves the power instead of lines. And, because they were like, oh yeah, building a giant, doubling transmission or tripling transmission across the island or over to Europe is just an incredibly expensive and largely unfeasible thing. Like, interprovincial transmission is so hard to get built, and it's not just because there's regulatory challenges, but it's just complicated, expensive stuff. And unless you're a public utility, the incentive for these 20, 30, 40-year investments is generally not market aligned. And Patty, do you know what Wix is?
I'm not sure what you're referring to. Sorry.
So Wix is like a website making thing. So if you were running a GoFundMe campaign, you're trying to bootstrap a little project, you might use Wix to make your website. It's cheap, it's easy, it's sort of the baseline you would do if you want to present something to the world on the internet and have it look okay. And so while John is talking about spending billions of dollars, the website for his Atlantic Grid was made on Wix. The socials that are on that don't go anywhere other than to Wix's Twitter, which means they put this website live without actually finishing it. And, it wasn't made by a web developer. It was made on this cheap bootstrap thing. And I really don't know how we can treat these really insane ideas with credibility. It is just such a different type of nonsense. And John has already said that he is not going to be spending all this money. He said when the business case is made, he won't have any problem finding capital. So John is not spending the money, as we see through his website. He is not intending to spend the money to build the project himself. This is not an Elon Musk level, I'm going to build out the supercharger network. This is a already failed energy businessman who is trying to position himself to own the energy corridor from Atlantic Canada into Quebec, which is, of course, another piece of irony that Quebec is now apparently talking to private energy producers in Atlantic Canada to get an energy corridor while we're not allowed to have one out of Labrador.
Yeah, that is, the irony is not lost on me. It would be nice to know a little bit more from, I would imagine, I don't work for Hydro-Quebec, I really don't know what they're up to, but I would imagine they're kicking every power tire that's out there, because they know, and the province knows, they've let some industrial and commercial opportunities go by the wayside because they don't have the power. So I don't think they really necessarily care about the generating source. I mean, price will have to factor in, obviously, and ownership and authority will have to factor in, but if they can get some of their commercial industrial projects off the ground, whether it be from these bloody AI data centers or whatever else, they'll take it. And this, I don't know if this ever has a shot to ever come to fruition, but it's a fascinating proposal and an immediate change of tune regarding green hydrogen to all of a sudden a reimagination of the Atlantic Loop, which was never more than a political branding exercise.
Well, and I mean, John did kind of already say he was getting out of green hydrogen when he did the pivot to ammonia, so or the pivot to AI. So he's kind of, it's almost like he's using this as his come to Christ moment. He's like, oh yes, no, I've finally seen the light now. And now I have your path to salvation for rural electrification. And his first idea was incredible. His second idea is incredible. And I hope to God the province is not treating his claims like they are credible, even if he has positioned himself very well within the federal liberal apparatus of handing out money to private interest.
Yeah, which reminds me of the line of credit he was given from the federal government. I think it was about $127 million. I have no idea how much of that was withdrawn or repaid. But yeah, we were told all along that the provincial government money will not be going into any of these green hydrogen plays, which don't seem to be a thing any longer. Plus, I'd like to hear even from the Everwinds of the world as to their position on Mr. Risley's proposal here. Because you're right, the 150 turbines on the Port au Port Peninsula to generate about 1 gigawatt, not the 5 gigawatts. So the tangle of this one it's extraordinary. I spent an unfortunate amount of time yesterday thinking about and looking at the geographical reality of trying to create 5 gigawatts of onshore wind.
Oh, it's nonsense. And even though like he had the opportunity to not say dumb stuff in public, but he just went all in on it. Like in his Financial Post interview, they were like, oh, okay, and so what's phase one of the project? Surely not the full 10 gigawatts. But no, he went all in. Phase one is 10 gigawatts. When with the ammonia play, he had kind of been artfully moving back and forth between 1 or 3 gigawatts for phase one, because the initial 3 was obviously bonkers for whatever reason, so they scaled it back to 1. And now with the new plan, phase one is 10 instead of like it's insane. It's nuts. I don't want to say it's Carl Diamond bad, because John obviously has more real money than Carl ever did, but the quality of ideas is just, it's nonsense. It's real. It's crazy.
So it's undeniable. John Risley has had enormous success in the business world. Of course he has. Clearwater, big success. The telecom company in the Caribbean, big success, sold for billions of dollars. I mean, even World Energy GH2, it's not like it's some sort of Newfoundland Labrador flop. They've done some pretty big business and seen some recent investment in their operations in the United States. So it's not like Risley doesn't have a little bit of the Midas touch, but this one just seems a little bit outlandish to me. And again, I'm not an electrical engineer, nor am I in high finance, but I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around this one.
Because there's nothing credible to wrap your mind around, Patty. That's the problem. You've learned too much about energy, and now you know what's silly. And John has proposed a silly thing.
Chris, I appreciate making time for the show. Thanks for the call.
I appreciate you, Patty. Have a good New Year.
You too. Bye-bye. Yeah, I mean, I'm not really interested in poo-pooing or scoffing at things that are, I mean, we're talking $75 billion, 5 gigawatts of wind energy just on this island, adding to the interconnectivity with 5 gigawatts of offshore wind in Nova Scotia. And that's just the first phase of this particular proposal that they're calling the clean energy grid, I believe is what they're branding it. All right, let's get a break in. When we come back, the topic, up to you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. And the question posed, I assume this from a fish harvester, is about the crab rebate. I have no idea what the amount is going to be, and I suppose that's a moving target, but apparently we're going to find out tomorrow exactly what's going on that front. Remember, prior to Christmas, we were told it was going to be put in front of a mediator for some expedited process, but here we are. It looks like tomorrow is a day where those who were expecting the crab rebate will find out exactly what it is. Also, an update of sorts from the RCMP regarding investigations into 2 fires. One, of course, the fires where locals think that it was absolutely purposely set, an act of arson on the Conception North Shore. We call it the Kingston Fire, where, of course, an enormous amount of land was burnt and maybe 200 structures were razed. So apparently that investigation continues. And they say some of these things are complicated and they'll take time. I get that when we're talking about fires that just happened this summer. They also gave us an indication that there was a continuing investigation into the fire that leveled the driftwood in, but that was back in October. I think it was October 19th of 2024. So I'm not, downplaying the complexity of some of these investigations, But you'd think we'd know a little bit something more about the Driftwood Inn, and it continues to amaze me that we haven't heard anything from whoever the owners of the Driftwood Inn are. I mean, when we see something like this, and I think you can say it's just luck that there wasn't more than one person killed, given the fact that the warning systems weren't working, so says the people who were staying at the Driftwood that night, and the heroic banging on doors of that one lady who smelled the smoke and got up and woke everybody up, or the people whose door she knocked on, and they got out, and of course the American tourist is dead. Generally speaking, during instances like that, folks who are involved with ownership or management would at least address the general public, say, you know, we're working with investigators and just something basic. But it's been mum's the word. And October 19th, 2024 is a pretty long time ago for this type of investigation. Look, again, the RCMP know more about the investigative process than I do, but I would have thought we'd know a little bit something more on that front. Even if we talk about the inspection process at the provincial government, you know, I would imagine there's been plenty of opportunity to understand the frequency of inspections, what was found to be not compliant, and whether or not it was rectified and another inspection follow-up had taken place, but we don't even know that much. And speaking of compliance, you know, there's a bunch of things that we think could be done in relatively short order. And if you look at the Auditor General's work, looking at personal care homes and long-term care homes, even in the personal care home business, the umbrella organization representing the owner-operators was, you know, not only welcomed it, but, you know, tried to break down what compliance or non-compliance actually means. Because it could be something like a faulty door jamb, right up to something that is extremely serious. And, you know, the incorrect administration of medicine and abuse, physical, verbal, emotional, and otherwise. If we want people to have a better understanding of the operations of personal care homes, because there's plenty of really good ones and plenty of good people working in personal care, but it should be a public reporting. You know, if we have restaurant inspections for health purposes, you can find out what the result of the inspection. And I think here, the same thing I think is pretty fundamental. And in fact, the Personal Care Home Association would like to see it so. So an inspection is done, there's issues that are identified that are not compliant with the regulations, we put it on the website. And then when the follow-up comes through and the issue has been rectified, you put it on the website. It gives that personal care home owner-operator the public the comfort of the public knowing that when problems are identified, they're on it and they're going to fix it. So I don't know why that can't be done in short order. This is not the most complicated thing in the world because the inspections take place, and so you just post it, and then the follow-up is done, and the personal care home operator says, okay, come back in, we've fixed whatever the non-compliant issue was, because it can be something that's fairly innocuous right up to something that can be extremely serious. So there's a couple of things that I think can be done pretty quickly. Also in the world of public release, because Premier Wakeman got off to a good start when he released publicly unredacted resignation letter come from Michael Wilson, which I think has been very helpful. I think also, because if we are going to have this referendum, and it used to be about the MOU, now it's going to be about the eventual definitive agreements, and you can offer your opinion one way or the other on it. But there was already a lot of work done by a committee to understand what actually happens in 2041. Because I think if just in your social circle, you ask 10 people, you'd probably get 5, 6, or 8 different opinions about what they think is going to happen in 2041. But the province knows because people have done the work. Just release that. I don't understand what a downside might be there. So you put it on the website and you put it in the newscast stories or put it on the news media websites so people can have a look. Because I think not only to be informed about the implications of a contract or contracts, but also how that relates to or dovetails with the reality of 2041. Because if we're going to be asked to vote on something, information is power. And I do think the referendum would be based a lot on emotion versus actual factual information. But let's put as many facts out there as we possibly can. And yes, people have opinions about best deal possible and those types of things. And that's nature of the beast. But actual factual eventual realities of 2041, they know what it is. They know what they are. So maybe, just maybe, you put that back out there. It can be part of the conversation going forward, because I do think there's a lot of different understandings or opinions about what actually happens in 2024 with the expiration of that particular contract. All right, let's see. Today's a good day to get on the program if you're in and around town. 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. We're taking a break and then we're coming back. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 1. Mike, you're on the air.
Yes, good morning, Paddy. How are you today?
Doing okay, thanks. How about you?
Oh, very good. Paddy, people in their community years ago always had someone that could tell the big fat lies, big whoppers they used to call them. And by God, John Risley's getting pretty good at them, I can tell you that. But 5 gigawatts down, subsea lines and transmissions and everything else. And when I got a little bit of stuff here I wrote down, and we should have some information here, and NL Hydro should be able to give us some data on this stuff. And excuse me, I got a bit of a sore throat. In the Fremuse wind farm is capable of 27 megawatts. St. Lawrence wind farm, 27 megawatts. Now, I visited both of them last year. 2 or 3 were out of service on both projects. But and they're backed up either by Holyrood or Beta Spear, or Muskrat Falls. Anyway, the power got to come from somewhere when there's no wind. But I had a look there today, and Fremuse today is 6 kilometers an hour. On Friday, it's 27 kilometers an hour. In St. Lawrence, it's 27 kilometers an hour, and 22 on Friday. Port-au-Port today, Port-au-Port, is 18 kilometers an hour and 28 kilometers an hour on Friday. So I done some research, and these turbines don't start to spin until about 15 kilometers. They're just barely producing any power at all. And 40 to 60 is the sweet spot where they reach their maximum capacity. So in the real world, and what John Risley is not telling you, or NL Hydro is not telling you, our government is not getting involved in and asking these questions. When he says 5 gigawatts, I can almost assure you he's looking at the capacity rating on every turbine. He's looking at 40 to 60 kilometers, 365 days of the year. And how can you commit to providing anybody like 5 gigawatts when the wind determines your business plan? You know, if you do any investigation at all, wind energy is 35 to 40% efficient. So if we take the 40% and times it by the 5 gigawatts, well, that's 2 gigawatts. You know, and that's and the reason it's 35 to 40% mainly is the wind. And then there's breakdowns and maintenance and everything else and stuff. So
the biggest energy loss is proximity to market. Okay. Yes. Just for the purpose of conversation, so I get where you're coming from, and if you hear from Risley, and I do think that this current proposal, I can't wrap my mind around it, but he does say that the issue regarding reliability and the ability to deliver the amount of power would be the different locations of the wind. So whether it be on the Burin Peninsula, the Port-au-Port Peninsula, whatever the case may be, and then offshore Nova Scotia, somewhere the wind will be blown. So says Mr. Risley. I kind of get that, but we're also talking about hugely geographically separated locations with all the required transmission to connect them. It's just wild to me.
Yeah. Well, even Port-au-Port there, if you take Port-au-Port today, and I only went today and Friday, on Thursday, I should say today and Thursday, 18 kilometers and 28 kilometers. That is nowhere near the 40 to 60 that they need. And at 88 kilometers from, and I stand to be corrected, whatever research that I've done, and I've researched a nice bit of it, at 88 to 90 kilometers, these are breakdown and they're shut down because of the wind and the strain and everything else. So we have a sweet spot there of 40 to 60 kilometers, which has to be consistent. So I have another, what I'm thinking about, maybe you can get someone on from NL Hydro, because Fremuse have been on the go for a long while. St. Lawrence has been on the go for a long while, and both of them are backed off the grid. And I'm sure they got efficiency data. Yes, and they got 27 megawatts there, providing all the wind turbines, because they use the sticker tag capacity with some of the stuff that are whatever's on that, whatever the maximum is, 1 megawatt, 2 megawatts is on the tower. When they come up with the 27 megawatts, that's how it's calculated. And it's calculated at maximum capacity, maximum capacity. So, and to add insult to injury with all this stuff, and I've been saying it before, I said about the hydrogen projects, and then it was going to be data centers. And these projects, billions and billions of dollars, in 25 years, most of this equipment is garbage. why, like, hydroelectric projects are the way to go, nuclear if need be. These are just a puff in the wind. It's a dream, and
Well,
lots of countries around the world, Paddy, are getting rid of them because they're too expensive. So
well,
I don't
in
know.
reality, wind and solar is being added at dramatic pace in a lot of the world. I do think some of the numbers I've seen regarding cut-in speed and optimal or full generation or full capacity is different given the height of the towers. And we do know the higher you go, the harder it blows. But, are some of those numbers that you're using, and I don't deny them, but I think that's like the size of these 200-meter towers, I think cut-in speed is probably going to be closer to 12 kilometers an hour. Maximum maybe optimal generation, I don't know what the right phrase is, but probably closer to 30 kilometers an hour, and then 50 for full, and then cut-out speed probably around 90 or 95 or 100 kilometers an hour. But you're right, there's a reliability question. I know the advancement in the world of battery storage is part of a wind and solar conversation as well, but that's not even mentioned in this particular plan. And I think this is, talk about the epitome of its infancy. I'd really like to know more about the relationship with Hydro-Quebec here. I really would. I think it's a complicated factor here because we're talking a lot about Hydro-Quebec and potential extended business with Hydro-Quebec.
Yeah. And Paddy, and you can probably, you can agree with this and stuff, and that over the years, yes, we get wind in Newfoundland. Sometimes we get lots of it, but I'm 63 years old. I've also been in this province and stuff, and Jesus, and I've been on the water and stuff a lot of times. It was over a week and hasn't blown at all. It's been absolutely beautiful for 7 or 8 days, not a draft of wind. That happens, and it happens on a regular basis here,
Yeah.
And
it depends on where here is. There's different types of, there's different wind speeds and frequency of high winds in different parts of the world. I mean, like if you just talk about the wind offshore Nova Scotia, if you ask Nova Scotians, they'll tell you that's a much different frequency of high winds offshore than it is onshore. And again, I'll just go back to the turbines of the Southern Shore, the turbines of Ramia are not what we're talking about here. So I do think that kind of changes the water and the beans insofar as how reliable the wind might be at 200 meters versus at, pick a number, 50 meters. So I think that's part of the conversation. I don't fully understand it, but everything I read about it is that the higher the wind turbine, the more reliable the wind will be. And you mentioned, at some moment or at some point they reach their life expectancy. A lot has happened in the last decade about repurposing wind turbines, whether it be the towers themselves and the metal and or the composite materials used for the blades themselves. So that's changing. It's not all the way here because we're still throwing some of these things in the dump, which is the furthest thing from green. But those things are indeed changing. Mike, final thoughts to you before we have to go to the news.
Yeah, we got data here right at our fingertips. NL Hydro has it. My understanding, 2006, 2009, Bermudes and St. Lawrence were put in the action and stuff. So they had the efficiency data at them and how many times you got to back it up and everything else. And I'll agree with you, the towers are higher and stuff, and that their sort of efficiency may be better with less wind. But still in all, a good example would be Bermudes and St. Lawrence. And NL Hydro has that information. And maybe they can come on publicly. Maybe Tony Wakeham can get on board and start asking some hard questions. If I can figure this out by just a little bit of research, I'm waiting for government to come out and have a real, intelligent conversation. NL Hydro come out because everybody seems to be, whatever John Risley comes up with, oh my God, it's bells and whistles and there's a bow on it.
Yeah. I don't know how we can translate reliability data from Bermudes to towers and heights of which are just so vastly different, but it gives us a baseline understanding of the data that's in hand, at least that much. Appreciate the time, Mike. Thanks for the call.
Okay, thanks, buddy. Have a good day.
You too, man. All the best. Bye-bye. And in the envelope of why didn't you mention this, why didn't you mention that, and so it's about floor crossing. Important conversation. We know that 3 members of the Conservative Party have left. One has just simply left the party, period. That's Maz Generou. And 2 have crossed and joined the Liberal caucus, Chris D'Entremont and Michael Maw. There's a story out there now, this BC member who is pretty polarising with his position on a variety of things. He's saying that he was approached by the Liberals and he's standing his ground. It's being applauded far and wide. I'm not so sure the story makes a whole lot of sense, but the floor crossing conversation we can absolutely have it. And then I was asked in the same email why we didn't mention the Chrystia Freeland conflict of interest now that she's been an economic advisor to Vladimir Zelensky. Well, we did, and her resignation, her stepping down as a member of parliament is mandatory, and not in the coming weeks. It should be done right away, and a by-election to be held in that Rosedale riding. So, yeah, mentioned it yesterday, and yeah, not so sure I buy the floor crossing story as portrayed by this one BC member of parliament. All right, let's go ahead and take a break for the news. When we come back, we're looking forward to speaking with you. Don't go away. Welcome back. Let's go to the email inbox. Fairly insightful email posing some pretty interesting questions. You know, number one, we're talking about the impact of the Venezuela business as it pertains to Alberta oil. And the question by the emailer is, what about Newfoundland and Labrador offshore oil? Good question. I suppose the only concern there would be the price per barrel, because we do indeed do a lot of forecasting or guessing at what the price per barrel will be over the fiscal year, and then add in the value of the Canadian dollar compared to the American dollar. So I think there's only a price implication there. People thought right away there'd be a huge crash in the value of the price of a barrel of oil. It's remained pretty stagnant since the Venezuela business. So I don't know if there's a big lot of concern necessarily for our offshore oil versus Alberta oil, because the vast majority of that, of course, goes to the United States and the U.S. Midwest, not to the southern refineries. Then they went on to talk about, you know, if we're talking about diversifying markets and being more self-reliant and supply chain concerns, that's a good one. When we talk about critical minerals, of which we sit on a wealth of them, especially in Labrador, is whether or not that could come with the additional capacity for secondary processing or tertiary processing, so that we actually maximize the value of the critical mineral as opposed to simply extracting it and then sending it somewhere else and they make something out of it and then we buy it back. So that's a fair question. But he also went on to pose one that I'm not so sure what to even say about it. It's about refining oil. In this country, there's somewhere between 17, 18, or 19 refineries. And the reason that there's not a very specific number to lean in on is because we're talking about facilities for asphalt and for gasoline and diesel. So let's just use 19. It not only refines domestic oil, but also imported oil. And the question went on to say, why are we buying oil from, say, for instance, the Saudis? Well, the country isn't. The Irvings are. And they've got that contractual relationship. Could they refine domestically produced oil? Sure. And, you know, that's that conversation about energies, pipeline, and what have you. But the question is, why not build more refineries so that we can be, you know, more in control of supply chain issues and possibly would have an impact on price? I don't know. But when the question is, why don't we do it? And not to be nitpicky, but who is we? Are we talking about governments, provincially or federally, building refineries? I mean, they're already getting in bed with carbon capture, and the Prime Minister, when asked yesterday about Canadian oil and the impact of the Venezuelan business, is that, you know, he mentioned specifically Pathways Alliance, the carbon capture project in Alberta. But building refineries, I would pose that fundamental retort as to who exactly is we. Just think about it. We don't necessarily fully trust governments and politicians to do some of the fundamentals, like stay on top of snow clearing and patching the potholes. So I'm not so sure what the appetite is for seeing governments build refineries. And if a private sector company is going to come to the forefront and make a proposal on a refinery, that generally comes with the want to see government invest in it. So is there even a business model for building refineries in the country? I don't really know the answer to that one, but it's an interesting question all the same. And then, of course, I get some pretty furious clapback when we talk about pipelines. Look, if there's a pipeline proposal, then I suppose whether or not people are liking it or loathing it, when Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta, saw fit to sign the MOU with the federal government, in this case, of course, the Prime Minister, to potentially see another pipeline built from Alberta to BC Tidewater. I mean, until there's a proposal, I don't really know what to do with that one. But does the country, the rest of the country, have the appetite to get into a taxpayer-funded pipeline? I mean, I think the answer to that one is, if no private sector company, and we can talk about regulations and uncertainty and what that might mean for the private sector to want to build a multi-billion-dollar pipeline, but do taxpayers have an appetite for that? In Alberta, they might. And remember, I mean, the impact of GDP in the fossil fuel business in Alberta is somewhere around 25, 27% of their GDP. We also have a pretty stern reliance on it in this province, but the rest of the country, not so much. I mean, the oil business accounts for somewhere around 2 to 3% of the GDP of the nation. So do taxpayers in other parts of the country want to get involved again in paying for a pipeline? I don't think it's disingenuous to say that, you know, we did all chip in with our federal tax dollars to twin the Trans Mountain pipeline. And the costs on that exploded. At the end of the day, it costs us what? Somewhere in the neighborhood of $33 billion. Is there actually a business model that makes that a wise move for taxpayers to get involved with? For the private sector, they can do their own evaluation. They know the industry, they know the business, they know access to capital. For taxpayers, I'm not so sure the country has the appetite for that next multi-billion-dollar pipeline. And if it costs $33 billion, now there are some interruptions which saw the cost increase regarding Trans Mountain. We all know that to be true. But even if you use a round number, $30 billion, even though everything's more expensive, labor's more expensive, material is more expensive. So when asked, you know, why don't we just do this or why don't we do that? I just have a fundamental question about who exactly is we. That's all. Another one is about the question I posed regarding Hydro-Quebec and this yet to be materialized, some sort of enormous proposal from John Risley regarding wind. I don't know. But if Hydro-Quebec is looking actively at other sources of power, because they need the power. How do we know that? Because they said it out loud. That's why Premier Legault came to this province talking about reopening the contract, renegotiating, because they need the power. Okay. Now, there's plenty of legitimate concerns about the authority given to Hydro-Quebec regarding Gull Island, but I suppose when they're going to assume the risk and actually going to build it, that's one part of the equation. And again, I am by no means suggesting that we just simply sign the contract for the sake of before they find another source of power. I'm not saying that. But I would be curious to see what this new independent panel is going to come up with and the recommendations they're going to make. And I'm still trying to wrap my mind around the two distinct moving parts here. Negotiations have pretty much stalled, we're told, and the new panel has a mandate that's broadened, which is a very good idea, to be able to associate some potential risks and or change in the transportation, the distribution of power from the Churchill River. So that's a very good thing. But at the same time, that report's not going to be back till April. And then if we're in fact going to have some sort of referendum on it, that's going to take a while. I mean, people are going to have to take the time to try to digest the recommendations in the report, to wrap their mind around whether or not they think this is a good idea, and then a referendum. At some point, we're either going to have to say, no, we're out, or yes, we're in. But how do we negotiate contracts when the negotiations have stalled? So at some point, if we're not negotiating now and we're waiting for the end of April, and I know the April timeline was an arbitrary one. I mean, the Quebecers don't have to go to the polls till October, so there's still time to wait, no doubt about that. But if we are not negotiating until the panel comes back with its report, and let's just say they say this is not a good deal, then I guess negotiations will continue. What happens if they come back and say it is a good deal, and one of the panelists is Michael Wilson, who had some well-articulated concerns with the original structure of the independent panel, then what exactly will we be voting on? If they say it's good, then who are the rest of us to say it's bad? Because especially it's the inclusion of Michael Wilson which I think really changed it. If he comes back and says, we think we've arrived at a good deal, we should proceed with the negotiations and definitive agreements, then is there any need for a referendum at that point? Your thoughts are welcome. Let's get a break in. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go. Line number 1. Colin, you're on the air.
Morning, Mr. Daly. How are you today?
Not too bad, thanks. How about you?
Pretty good, thanks. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well.
Wanted to talk about the situation going on in Venezuela and apparently other places that could be targeted now by the lunatic in chief, Mr. Trump. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, where would you like to start?
I'm just at a loss for words what happened last weekend with the invasion of Venezuela by American Special Forces to receive Nicolas Maduro and his wife. And Trump is threatening not only Venezuela now, but Mexico and Cuba, Denmark via Greenland, and Colombia. And he's got all of these high-ranking cabinet members, especially Rubio, who seems to be the prominent mouthpiece in the cabinet now. Vance is strangely silent on this. I haven't heard too much from him, but Rubio and Hegseth, they seem to be in lockstep with Trump. So there doesn't seem to be any outward displays of dissent by anybody in that administration.
But there has been change in tune. The Secretary of Defense, Mr. Hegseth, over the summer was quite proudly saying that, the globalist regime changes of the past are not something this country will be entertaining into the future. And now here we are. And you mentioned Rubio. I mean, I suppose as a Secretary of State, obviously he would be one of the loudest voices on matters like this. And apparently he's de facto running Venezuela, which is quite bizarre. The one thing to me, look, we can talk about, Maduro is an evil, corrupt, despotic dictator that needed to go. It's how he went, and a plan after he goes is what's kind of missing here. And rationale has been all over the place. The president yesterday, talking about Venezuela and making the power move, he said, because if we don't win the midterms, I will get impeached. So what are the real motivations here? I mean, the vice president of Venezuela is now de facto the interim president. So we changed, or there was very little change in that country. And I mean, even the oil industry, they're not diving headlong into a very unstable region with the billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars required. So I was going to say it's a real head scratcher, but I think if we're going to be honest with each other, the motivations are becoming clearer and clearer by the day.
Yeah, Trump is invoking the Monroe Doctrine from the 19th century. As far as I can tell, with the 21st century spin on it. If I were Zelensky in Kyiv, I'd be very worried. How motivated is the United States to seek a peaceful settlement to the aggression caused by Russia in that country and the 4-year war going on there now, and not only on the mainland, but the invasion of the Crimean Peninsula back in 2014. I don't see very much hope for that conflict to be settled in 2026. I think it might actually expand. I think given what's happened in Venezuela now and the threats that are being made to Colombia and Mexico and Greenland and Denmark by extension, I think this would only embolden people like Putin and Xi Jinping in China. And I think Putin may see this as a sign that he sees division in NATO and discord. And I think he might take advantage of that or try to and make a move into other, Poland or the Baltics. And that would be a real test for NATO. And I don't think the United States under Trump would put any muscle in there to stop any Russian aggression against any NATO territories. I never thought I would say that, but I think that's going to be the case, and I think Putin is going to take advantage of that.
Well, I mean, this is not. Let's just use the president's own words. You can go all the way back to 1987, and he's been talking about dismantling NATO, and he's talked about it as president. So it's not outrageous to think that that's the end, or one of the end goals that he has in mind, because he said as much himself. I mean, and again, don't take it from Colin, don't take it from me. And then even the messaging regarding Venezuela is kind of wild, right? So he was an illegitimate president, was leader, I'll say, who lost back in 24. That's true. Then he gets replaced by the VP as opposed to the opposition leader who actually won the election. And maybe that's got some burnt out Nobel Peace Prize implications associated with it. Then they were telling us it's all about the effort to stop fentanyl, but he's indicted for cocaine. So when you can't even follow along with the coherent message, it really does lead people down rabbit holes of what is the motivation? What's the end goal here?
I think it's oil.
That's certainly part of it.
I think, yeah, well, a big part of it. But I think Trump has this idea, going back to the Monroe Doctrine and the political views of the 19th century, that the world has to be carved up in spheres of influence. And the United States will have its sphere of influence in the Americas. And the Russians, they can take care of continental Europe. And the Chinese, they can take care of the Pacific Rim. And there's a lot of disputed territory, not only obviously Russia now with what they're doing there in Ukraine, and potentially with a threat to NATO territories, but Xi Jinping has been saber-rattling over Taiwan over the last week or so now too.
For sure.
And, there's disputed territories between Japan and China going back predating the Second World War that are still hotly contested. So we have, 4 or 5 different hotspots and potential hotspots that if they all ignite because of Trump, or Trump plays a big role in igniting these, conflicts, and some of them are just percolating under the surface now, we could be into a global conflict very quickly.
And that's not hyperbolic. That is possible. And regardless, I'm going to get some furious emails about, Trump hater, this and that. Most of what's being said is words that came out of his own mouth. This is not, painting an illegitimate picture based on dislike or whatever of the president. But, it does remind me, and someone had to remind me, and I hadn't thought of it, but you go back to the impeachment hearings of 2019. An American diplomat, Fiona Hill, said in front of Congress under oath that there was a deal being struck between Trump and Putin that Trump would not do any interference regarding Trump would be willing to give up Ukraine if they could take Venezuela. She said it in 2019. And, now, where are we? So she's either a brilliant forecaster or has some deep connections inside the CIA to be able to say that out loud on TV under oath in front of Congress. Yeah.
And what happens if Trump goes into Greenland? On the western coast of Greenland, you have a lot of Canadian territory not far from there, Ellesmere Island and other land masses there. Labrador is just southwest of Greenland. What's he going to do next? You're going to look at Labrador and say, they got a lot of minerals there in Labrador. I think that's in the U.S. national security interest now too. I think we're going to move in there.
Well, it's not outrageous, and here's why I think that. And I'm not going to look down the road and think there's going to be any sort of military coercion in this country. I'm just going to hope that is never part of the conversation. But the national security business has been used on a variety of fronts. It's been used for softwood lumber. It's been used to justify the creation of these new higher tariffs, steel. He's using national security as the loophole out of a lot of restraints or guardrails that are in place for a reason. But when national security is uttered, all of a sudden those guardrails are lowered, if not decimated.
Yeah. And there's, this is not the first time around. This is not Trump 1.0. But you had John Kelly there as the chief of staff, and McMaster and all the other guys that he fired, and Rex Tillerson. He was the Secretary of State there. Even if he never agreed with their politics, these were people who were, well educated. Got the academic credentials, got the professional credentials, got a world of or wealth of experience in business and stuff. And now you got people like Steve Miller, who's the Deputy White House Chief of Staff, and he's very, very aggressive on foreign policy. And he's talking about Greenland. Like there's only 30, and this is him speaking, not me, saying there's only 30,000 people in Greenland. Who's going to challenge the United States to if we go in there? That's NATO territory. So we could potentially have one NATO country attacking another NATO country. So would Denmark invoke Article 5? And would we now be at war with the United States? These are questions that have to be asked, right?
Yeah, I don't know how we arrived at this particular moment in time, but here we are.
These are questions that have to be asked. And I never thought I would have to publicly state these rhetorical questions on the public airwaves. But the President of the United States is a threat, a physical threat to this country. And people who think he's not are delusional. He's threatening to take Greenland. That's NATO territory. What's next? We got to sit back and wait, and he's going to send the Marines into coastal Labrador because he wants to seize territory there now because he thinks, the minerals in Labrador are national security interest to the United States, so we got to seize that now too. And he gets a free pass from the people in his administration because nobody's willing to stand up to him.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and some of the takes that I read, I saw one, I suppose it was last night, is that Greenland's not even on the North American, not even on the European tectonic plate, so why does it belong to Europe? For the love of God. I mean, Hawaii is not on the American tectonic plate either, so does that mean that it's up for grabs? It's all just so bizarre. And it'd be great, and I know this is impossible and it's a bit Pollyanna, but if we could just for a brief moment consider what's going on and back out of the right versus left kind of stuff and the back and forth libtard and retard and cry harder, cope and seethe, all those types of things, which are throwaway juvenile swats when these are serious matters. And maybe it'd be great if there were some serious people involved, but it seems there's a lot of very unserious people involved that are treating this like it's a video game. I mean, just see the chest thumping. We're talking about real life implications here, but that's not the rhetoric we get from so many leaders, and it's just, I was going to say disheartening, it's infuriating. Colin, last thoughts to you before I have to go.
Trump has said earlier this year, or last year, sorry, that he views the Canada-U.S. border as an artificial line. His words, not mine. So, does he view the Canadian landmass as already some sort of de facto extension of the United States territory? Because if he says the Canada-U.S. border is an artificial line, that's the only implication to draw from that, right?
He said it. So we'll see where it goes. It's sometimes really hard to follow, but of course I have no choice but to. Colin, good to have you on the show. Happy New Year. Stay in touch.
Cheers, Paddy.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Let's get a break in. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Good morning, Jim. You're on the air. Hi, Jim. Jim, are you there on line number 2? Maybe Jim's gone for a cup of tea. Dave, I'm going to put him on hold. You see if you can figure that out for me. The subject line says senior snow clearing. I'm not exactly sure where he's going, but I do, and I'm sure lots of people in the media do get emails and requests for some sort of assistance out there for seniors to get their walkway or their driveway shoveled. Seems to me gone are the days where, you'd have a snowstorm and you just look out your window, there'd be young fellas or young people going up and down the road with the shovels over their shoulders, wanting to make a few bucks and offering to shovel your driveway. Does anybody even do that anymore? It used to be all the rage. I mean, we did it plenty when we were young too. Bit of snow hits, shovel, go knock on doors. You want me to shovel your driveway? Make yourself $20 or whatever the case may be. I don't know if that's still a thing anymore. I'm not sure what Jim's request is or concern, but let's see if we got him on 3. Jim, you're on the air.
Yes, Paddy, I'd like to ask, do you have a number for this snow clearing and grass cutting for seniors? How do you go about applying?
So are you referring to the province's Aging Well at Home grant? The $400?
Is that the one that's supposed to come to GST?
No, that's a senior's benefit. The Aging Well at Home grant is a different thing, and it's up to $400 annually for people who qualify. So the eligibility, I think, is around $50,000 for couples, or just over $32,000 for singles. If so, and you have to be 65 years or older, and you could be eligible for it. Yes.
Right. Now, do you have a number for that, or how do you go about applying?
Well, do you do anything online, by chance?
No, sorry.
Okay, let's see if I can get you a number.
Thank you.
And so it goes through Newfoundland Labrador Health Services. And let's see here. Okay, I think I've got it here now. Let's see. No, that's a fax number. My God, fax numbers. See if I can't get your phone number. So you do qualify based on the eligibility for income?
Yes.
Okay. Here's the number that I have from the government's website. It's 709.
Okay.
651.
651.
62.
62?
Yeah, 6273.
73.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to ask about the other grant. What about this one that was supposed to call, I don't know if it's called a grant or what it's called, come out around at the same time as GST?
It comes out the same time as GST, and that's what they call the seniors benefit. And there's some question as to whether or not people who are eligible actually got it. It was supposed to come out on the 5th of January, on Monday. So, and if you don't have to apply for that one, based on your tax filings with CRA, if you hit the eligibility criteria, that's supposed to come automatically. There's no application process for it. It's administered by CRA, but it is a provincial plan, and it maxes out at $1,551 per year and paid out quarterly, the same day as the GST. It'll come on the same check, I'm told. At one point, I thought it was 2 different checks, but apparently it all comes on the one check. So if you're eligible, you should have got it on the 5th.
Yeah, well, no, I didn't anyway.
We sent a follow-up email to CRA on it because some people told me they got it and some people told me they didn't. So I don't know what the snag is there, but we're going to try to help figure it out.
Okay, and all right, the last 4 numbers was 6273 for the other one?
That's the one.
Thank you, sir.
No problem at all. Good luck, Jim.
Nice. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah, I mean, I can just try to help find the information, but I have no real authority in the execution of the monies being paid out. But there's some sort of disconnect obviously going on here, because if you read about the seniors benefit, it says right away that it's based on your tax filings. So if you file your taxes and you meet the eligibility threshold, it's supposed to come out with the GST on the quarterly GST dates. Since that, and that the date this month or this quarter was the 5th of January. Some people reporting that they did indeed get it, and some saying that they are indeed eligible and were last year, and nothing's changed in their world insofar as income, and they didn't get it on the 5th. I mean, I know things are a bit of a mess sometimes when we try to rely on different government departments to live up to their end of the bargain, but we're trying to help figure it out. But I don't have an answer as to why that disconnect or miscommunication is in play. So when some people get it and some people don't, it just speaks to the inefficiency sometimes of government departments. So again, we can see if we can't help figure it out on that front. And back to the aging well at home grant. You know, the $400 can be helpful. Of course it can. Whether it be to hire someone to shovel the snow or mow the grass or paint the fence or deliver groceries or whatever the case may be. There was at one point some vague warnings that seniors were being encouraged to keep receipts. I mean, are we really going to go down that path of auditing a senior who got $400 as to how they spent it? Suppose you want to spend it on skip the dishes to save yourself some cooking and cleaning one night and to get someone in to help shovel out the driveway. I mean, let's not do that. I mean, I know people are talking about how people spend government money that's earmarked for one thing or another. $400 annually for a senior to do any of those aforementioned tasks or get help doing those tasks, let's just leave it at that. We're not going to chase people around. Just imagine the cost of the bureaucracy to do a quote-unquote audit of someone who got $400, who was technically eligible, you know, as an annual income of less than $30,000, and we helped him out on that front. Imagine chasing him around. Can I see your receipts for what you did there? In addition to that, you know, when it was first created, $400 had $400 worth of purchasing power. These years later, it's not the same. So I do think, just like when we talk about guaranteed income supplement and things like that, the eligibility thresholds need to be evaluated and probably need to be increased. You know, I know the seniors benefit when they did increase the eligibility threshold. It now captures around 50,000 seniors here in the province. But if it's that, or if we're talking about the GIS or otherwise, I do think it's time, based on cost of living and inflationary pressures and the price of groceries and the rest of it, it's time to give it a look. Because when it's created with an intended goal, got to make sure that those goals actually capture the number of Canadians who actually need that additional level of financial support. So, and I know, look, people say, well, we're broke. Yeah, but we get even further broke if we're compromising the health and the ability to heat your home and eat properly because you don't have enough money as a senior. You know, for folks who are not seniors, there are different options out there to try to help pad your bankroll. You know, whether it be second job or whatever the case may be. But I think it's a different conversation when we're talking about a senior on a fixed income with very little money's coming in the door. All right, let's get a break in. When we come back, plenty of show left for you. Don't go away. All right, welcome back. Let's go to line number 2. Kimberly, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Morning to you.
How are you?
Not too bad, thanks. How about you?
I'm good. Happy New Year.
The very same to you.
Okay. Patty, the reason why I'm calling this morning is there was some topics of conversation going on in my family during the holidays, and it's regarding my parents' house. Both of my parents have passed, and the house is still standing. And apparently the house was willed to the oldest brother in the family. And that oldest brother has since passed. And he apparently, in turn, has left the house to his wife. And this wife is ill, and apparently now she, in turn, has either gifted my parents' house or she has sold my parents' house to her daughter, who is not a part of our family. She's not my brother's daughter. But anyway, I'm just trying to figure out how a person would go about finding out who the house was actually willed to if there was indeed a will.
So, inside of Justice and Public Safety, there's such a thing as a family justice service. So it's free, and it's they deal with things like family law issues. I think they also include some evaluation of wills. So Family Justice Services is one. Then there's private mediators out there as well who can be very helpful as opposed to getting into the court system, which can be costly and lengthy. So I tried two. I tried Family Justice Services, and that's at the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador. It is free, and I think they deal with wills. If not, there's private mediators out there or neutral mediators. One comes to mind here locally called Jazz Mediation. You might be able to try them. So those are the two suggestions that come to the top of my head.
Okay, yeah, because now I'm not going without giving out too much information or anything like that. One of my family members came into a substantial amount of money, and they have put a substantial amount of that money into a lawyer trying to get access to the will, and it is just not coming. So, another question I would have, and like you say, you got to watch yourself and you got to be careful, and, would there be an issue? I don't know how to put this out there. If I were to go to the house, if I were to go out and I were to go into the house, what do you think would be the consequences I would suffer if I were to access my parents' house and say the police were to show up and say, okay, you need to leave, and I need to say, no, you need to leave because I don't have a will to my parents' house. I haven't lived in my parents' house since I was 16 years old. I don't have access to my parents' house, and I never did, and I really don't want access. I just get tired, and I'm tired of all of the talk and the backlash going on within the confines of what's being talked about in regards to the house. And myself personally, I've reached out to the person that had won the substantial amount of money and asked him if he could sit down with this lawyer and maybe write a book about all of the abuse that has gone on in that house. I left that house. I ran away when I was 16 years old, Paddy. And it's ridiculous that people are actually fighting over this house. There should be someone compensated like myself for all of the abuse that I suffered inside the walls of it. It was horrible. It was alcohol. It was guns. It was knives. It was physical abuse. It was sexual abuse. There was everything going on inside the walls of that house. And somebody is fighting for that to be a summer home. My God Almighty. Where are people going these days in their heads? What's wrong with people?
That's a good question. And there's nothing quite like the intensity or the ferocity of a fight like a family fight. It can be awful.
I know. And you know what? My blood's kind of boiling now even talking about it, because nobody ever reached out to me and said, you know what, Kim? I understand why you left when you were 16 years old. I get it. And I brought my children up. Sometimes I put my children through a little bit in regards to alcohol abuse. I went through it myself, Patty. I dealt with it myself. And, I just don't understand what is wrong. And I want to talk about something else, but I'll have to call another time, and it's regarding a baby in Children's Protection Services that's in my family. And there's nothing but a fight over this little baby that was supposed to be placed in my home, a safety home, where there was no drugs, no alcohol, no cigarette smoking, and Mom could be here. And it was taken away. No, sorry, the safety plan, you can't have that safety plan. You're not that girl's aunt. Just people are gone crazy in the world, Paddy.
Yeah, that they are. Listen, I hope the mediation suggestions I gave you, hopefully they're helpful. And if they're not, get back to me and I'll try to come up with something else.
Sounds good to me. Thank you so much, Paddy.
You're welcome. Good luck.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah, it's true, isn't it? You know, there's nothing quite like when you have a close-knit family, that sense of security and love and what have you. But when the cracks start, the fights can be pretty personal. Why? Because you've got a long history with each other. So I hate when I hear those stories, but they're obviously very real. Let's go to line number 1. Elizabeth, you're on the air.
Hi, Patty. I'm Elizabeth. I'm Larry Dowie's niece. I'm Elizabeth Mary, originally a Dowie, so I am Larry Dowie's niece. I'm just calling I was talking with your producer because I called him because my son Chase is really into history. And I called your producers to see if you had any material of Larry's archival moments that I could have to pass on to him in a link or something like that, or if anybody else has them that they could send me the link because he's extremely into politics and history and all of that stuff.
The short answer is we probably can help you on that front. Now, I'm not going to say and speak for Brian O'Connell, but he did a lot of archival moments with Larry Dowie, and O'Connell keeps and collects a lot of stuff. So I'll personally reach out to Mr. O'Connell to see if he can help us. Also, we might have some in our own archives here at VOCM, which Dave Williams will certainly have a look for you. In addition to that, you might be able to reach out to the archivist, Greg Walsh, at the Rooms. He might also be able to help you.
Perfect. Yes, absolutely. Perfect. Thank you so much.
We'll get back to you if we can help, or if Brian O'Connell can help. And of course, if you're listening, Brian, I'm not putting you on the spot. If you don't have it, you don't have it. But we'll check here. We'll check with Brian. But absolutely contact Greg Walsh at the Rooms at the archives. He's probably got some too.
Perfect. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure, Elizabeth. No problem.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye. Yeah, we haven't had Greg on the show in a while as the archivist at the Rooms. I mean, I don't know if you've ever explored the archives at the Rooms, but it's pretty extensive. There's some fascinating material that you right there at your fingertips at the Rooms. Remember the kerfuffle when the Rooms was being designed and yet to be built, and the drawings were out and the complaints were flying about the box that the Basilica came in and those types of things? Now that it's there and it's been there for however long, it just seems a very natural part of the landscape, and there has been some great stuff and great displays or exhibits at the Rooms. And again, didn't mean to put Mr. O'Connell, Brian O'Connell, or Greg Walsh on the spot, but those are the two most likely places you're going to be able to find some audio archival moments with Larry Dowie, because I know Brian did a lot with him. So we'll see exactly whether or not she can come up with it. And if she can't, through those two avenues, myself and Dave will have a look through our own archives here at the station, see if we can find something. I imagine we can. All right. Just in reference to a tweet, the Premier has already stated that a referendum will not be held on an MOU, it would be held on a final negotiated deal. Exactly. I guess maybe some of the confusion lies with the fact that during the campaign, when the Liberals were, of course, leaning in hard on the Memorandum of Understanding, and the PCs were pretty consistent, not that they said it was a terrible deal necessarily, is that they thought there was a need for a further, more independent review. At that time, we were talking about some organization with a bit of global horsepower, with an understanding of the hydro business and high finance, because we're talking about like $500 billion here, that was going to be the go-to for the independent review. And it was going to be of the MOU. And now that's all changed, which I think is probably why there's a bit of confusion out there, is now we're talking about an independent review of eventual definitive agreements. We're talking about an independent review now of the negotiated MOU, or wherever that stands at this moment in time. But the referendum will now be on definitive agreements as opposed to on the MOU. So there's a reason why people are confused. Ted Blades, you're the man. It already exists. And we're talking about archival moments with Larry Dowie. So if you're listening, Elizabeth, Mr. Blades has filled us in here. If you go to Stream VOCM, you can listen to archival moments with Larry Dowie playlist online for free at SoundCloud. That's how in tune I am. I got my hands full just trying to execute the show from 9 to 12. Other than that, big thanks to the listeners who, whenever I'm asked about stuff like that and I don't really know where to go, apparently we do know where to go. And so there you go, Elizabeth. I hope you're listening. You go to the SoundCloud and you'll be able to find Archive of Moments with Larry Dowie playlist right there for free. Excellent. Thank you, Ted. Let's get a break for the news. When we come back, we're speaking with you. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back to the show. Good question posed by an emailer during the news break. I made mention of the new urgent care clinic that's soon to be open to the general public up on Stavanger Drive in the old Costco building. And this is something that we've mentioned in the past, but it's worth putting back out there again. There was always thoughts and rumbles about creating this urgent care clinic here in the city. And if that's the case, you do wonder aloud with how many buildings were actually built that could accommodate this type of this comprehensive suite of offerings. Costco building was one. It was for sale. And as opposed to the province taking full control and ownership of it and buying it, we're now leasing it off a private sector company. And we're actually paying for all the renovations. So it is a fair question as to why we did not pursue some commercial real estate when we knew we needed some commercial real estate to establish the urgent care clinic. Because it was always coming. It was part of the plan. And that's not on NL Health Services. That'd be on the government itself. It's the very same conversation when you talk about the Comfort Inn, and that conversation has seemingly gone by the wayside. So for residents in the Airport Heights area, their initial concerns was an uptick in property-related crime. And I think that the RNC acknowledged it and understood it. And I don't know what the frequency or prevalence of it is now, but that's one question that I'll put out to residents in the area. Secondly, as opposed to what happened in other provinces when they created what they refer to as a transitional home. And we haven't had much of an update recently about how many people who were residents or clients at the Comfort Inn, I think they call it Horizons 106 these days, how many have actually been transitioned out into their own place with maybe the job training required to be able to take care of their own needs and wants. So it would be nice to get an update there. But much akin to the Costco-related story is, as opposed to buying the hotel, which we probably could have, or maybe could have, but was never even entertained. The minister responsible at the time, John Abbott, I asked him directly on this program, did we offer or try to buy the Comfort Inn? And the answer was no. So we simply entered into a 3-year lease, and it comes with pretty significant cost. So the lease itself was in and around $7 million a year for 3 years. And that's only a portion of the cost, because then it's everything else. It's the renovations, it's the daily upkeep, it's the operations, it's the food, it's the staff. So it comes into a price tag closer to $40 million. The further complicating problem there is that the owners locally have sold to a company, I can't remember if it's Ontario or Quebec, but sold to out-of-province owners. So we don't know what their plans are into the future for that particular building. Are they going to go back to operating as a hotel? Are we going to be able to extend the lease? And if not, are we going to have to start from scratch? And starting from scratch includes what? I mean, is there something else out there, a property similar to it, that could be converted into some sort of transition home with the required, as they say, the wraparound supports? I really don't know, but that's a very good question about why we didn't simply buy the Costco building and take on the ownership and do the renovations and hold it in perpetuity as part of the provincial government's real estate assets. Good question. And I think also a looming question about the future of the Comfort Inn. So if you're in the area and want to talk about whether or not things have changed for the better, insofar as what we saw was an uptick in property-related crime and other matters of concern, if that's been tempered, it'd be great to get an update from the residents of the area, because I don't know, because I don't live up there. There was also immediate questions and concerns about the proximity to most of the services the residents at the Comfort Inn would need, because the majority of them are located in Centre City or in the downtown. And Airport Heights, of course, is well removed from the downtown. So those are all pretty genuine concerns. But I guess the ultimate question, because we can worry about leases and purchases and real estate, whether or not we've actually had the success that we need or hoped for insofar as transitioning people out. Because that was the goal. right? It simply wasn't going to be an emergency shelter. It's whether or not we were going to see some successes with transition, because that's how it was labeled and that was the intended goal. I know some people have been transitioned out, but how many? And what does their present and future look like? I don't have an answer to that question, but it's a good one. Same thing as it pertains to emergency shelters. You know, it was just last year or the year before when the province even put forward code of conduct and operational manuals and some of the way we oversee and mandate operations inside emergency shelter, whether it be for cleanliness and safety and all the rest of it. For starters, it's mind-boggling that it took all that time to do at least that little bit. Secondly, is unlike many other provinces, emergency shelters in this province, we pay millions and millions of dollars to private landlords to be operating an emergency shelter. It does question the veracity of the policy itself. I mean, is that the right play? And if so, why are the other provinces in the country not doing it? Why? Because it makes more sense when government offers it itself. Because then you bring in that accountability. For a private landlord, some of them might be doing their level best. It's a difficult clientele, we know, because they're not being accepted in other shelters for a variety of reasons. And so I get it. It can't be easy for safety and cleanliness and hygiene and the type of food and what have you. But if the province owned and operated them, then there would be that absolute go-to, can reach out and touch them for accountability, which is not part of the equation at this moment in time, which I don't think makes a whole lot of sense to me. Last one before we try to get you on the phone and get to the break. There's so many people who continue to send me emails in complete full-throated support of the 51st state stuff. For the life of me, I don't know why. Look, the concerns we have domestically and domestic policy and housing and healthcare and whatever the case may be, why does it look, and I get some of the despair in certain parts of society and in our communities, but what exactly changes for the better if all of a sudden we give up our sovereign status and roll over and willingly become part of the United States of America? Like, I don't even get it. The emails are always pretty vague. They simply say 51st state now, and or maybe some slight elaboration, but not much in the way of why things would be any better for anybody in the country. Because I don't think it would be, personally, and I would resist it in full. I don't actually have any say, as you know, but I just simply do not get it. On that vein, when we talk about being masters of our own futures and things like, Canadian policy, Canadian voices leading the way and ruling the roost, boy, is that even the case any longer? I mean, we know, even when we talk about, say, for instance, Alberta separation. One of the key separatist voices in Alberta is a guy named Jeff Rath. And he has said quite clearly that they are being supported by American monies. I mean, how can that be a good thing for us? The Americans' wants and hopes and aspirations are different than ours. So, I mean, how effective is it? I don't know what the percentage is, and we'll soon find out when they have a referendum. It's generally been around 30% of Albertans are in favor of, but you wonder what drives their motivation to be on side with separating. They'll talk about Laurentian elites and being taken advantage of by Ottawa and footing the bill for Atlantic Canada, even though some of that equalization talk is based on not reality, but emotion. And then it's the whole bit about who gets to influence who. We have a problem with the Chinese, we have a problem with the Russians, and we absolutely have a problem with the United States. And then it gets back into the role of what we'll refer to as the media, the mainstream, the legacy, and the new media. For the life of me, I can't understand how all of a sudden we pretend that all the media we consume is somehow left-leaning. Let's just have a look at some of the ownership of some of the main media platforms in North America. All right. The Ellisons, Larry and David, they own Paramount Plus, they own TikTok, CBS News. There is no way anyone can convince me that that's some sort of left-leaning outlet. Then you look at Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, he's in favor of whatever the way the wind's blowing, wherever he can make money. But Meta, Facebook, and Instagram, I mean, that's a main source of news for a lot of people. The Murdochs. The Murdochs are, of course, Fox. Also, the Wall Street Journal. Also, the New York Post. Obviously, and nobody can tell me that they're anything but absolutely on the right side of the political spectrum. The Sinclairs, well understood to be a very conservative family, and they're involved, of course, with NBC and Fox and ABC. They run the Sun operation in the newspaper business. Jeff Bezos, of course, with Prime Video. I think he owns Twitch, and he owns the Washington Post. Very much not in the pocket of George Soros or the left-leaning. Alphabet Inc., of course, publicly traded company, so it's hard to tag them with a left or right business, but I don't think we can call them any sort of left-leaning organization. Mr. Musk. Elon Musk, obviously, very much a very loud and influential voice on the political right of the spectrum. Twitter, for one. I mean, played a pretty big role in the most recent elections. Apple publicly traded was, of course, but no one can convince me that there's some sort of left-leaning liberal pushover company. Artificial intelligence. I guess the big one at this moment in time, and when we talk about large language models, is ChatGPT. Sam Altman, not a liberal, right? So when I hear all the time that, bought and paid for media, all left-leaning, all liberals. Boy, we just went through a pretty extensive list of the furthest thing from left-leaning liberal organizations, platforms, and owners. The Ellisons, the Zuckerbergs, the Murdochs, the Sinclairs, the Bezos, Musk, Altman. So it's a remarkable conversation. I don't know how we arrived there, but there we go. All right, let's get a break in. When we come back, plenty of show left for you. All you have to do is give us a shout to get in the queue, and away we go. Welcome back to the show. So, who knows what the future of NATO holds, because certainly there's a lot of questions being asked of that very concern at this moment in time. But the question being posed is about defense spending. So there's already rules in place about procuring domestically as best possible. We don't produce everything, obviously, that we're going to need, militarily speaking. The big one and the big price tag that people are thinking about, or some people are talking about, is fighter jets. Of course, we have to replace our aged fleet. There's no question about it. We've entered into a contract to buy 14 F-35s from the Americans. I think 84 is the total number of aircraft over the next number of years. But we've only paid for 14. So the question then becomes, do we need to continue to support the American military complex with the purchase of the remaining F-35s? The short answer is no. We have different considerations that can be involved in the conversation. I don't know how much anybody who I read about knows about fighter jets, capacity and capability and control. And it'd be nice if people who actually know exactly what they're talking about to offer up their insights about whether or not what we really need are the F-35s, enormously expensive, or the Swedish Gripens. I don't know. I don't really understand all the capabilities or capacity of either of them. But, there is a conversation to be had, isn't there? People will be worried about the additional costs of a mixed fleet. And then, of course, the mixed operations and mixed training and all the rest that goes with having two different style of fighter jets as part of the Canadian military. With the Gripen, though, what we do know is the Swedes have said quite clearly they'll build them here and create 12,000 jobs in the process. Then we talk about the more advanced F-35, which I'm told is exactly the case, that it is more advanced. How much more? And is it something we actually need? Now, we shouldn't just undersell and provide less than good or great equipment to members of our military simply because of some economic gripe with the Americans. I'm not suggesting that. But we have fallen into this F-35 crack for a long, long time. I mean, it's well over a decade ago when the process was well underway and then went by the wayside. There was some absolutely incorrectly derived math by the then Conservative government about the actual cost of the F-35s, but we just shot ourselves in the foot again. Had we executed this the way we should have all those years ago, we'd have some of these fighter jets. They'd already be in the fleet. And we'd probably be on the second wave of delivery. But no, we did what we generally do, is we make poor decisions at the time, all based on the politics as opposed to the needs on the ground, the needs of the military. So again, I'm not going to pretend that I understand all of the different capacity and capabilities of either the aforementioned fighter jets, but I'm not so sure why it wouldn't be part of the conversation. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Ken, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
I'm okay. How about you?
Well, not too bad. just yeah, I moved. I do have something else, but I want to give you some good news out here. I was in the process of going homeless in Gould. Fortunately, I found a place in Placentia, and you know what? It's absolutely gorgeous out here. The people are awesome. We've got an awesome landlord. So shout out to this community. Anyway.
Well, I'm happy that you found a nice place. Placentia is a beautiful spot.
Oh man, I can't wait for summer to come so I can get out on my bike and cover these hills. I've already started a Facebook page called Placentia ... Evan by Sea.
Okay.
And so, yeah, it's going really well. Been out here now for a couple of weeks. But anyway, this came across my radar. It says John Risley calls time of death on green hydrogen plans, but he's still set on windmills, they call it. But so a couple years ago when this was such a big deal, I mean, massive jobs to Newfoundland and all this stuff. What was it? Just a green grifter? What was all this about anyway? I would really like to know.
Well, I think he was probably chasing some direction coming directly from the federal government, because prior to any of these proposals coming to this province, the federal government themselves said that they valued the green hydrogen industry at somewhere around $12 trillion by mid-century. So when the federal government says that, and they talk about being able to subsidize these types of projects, of course businessmen like John Risley are going to say, oh, that looks like an opportunity. But since then, even after the MOU was signed with the German Chancellor or what have you, they haven't built any offloading capacity in Europe, whether it be at the Port of Rotterdam or Port of Amsterdam. Plus, the federal government themselves has reduced $12 trillion down to $2 trillion. So everything's changed in green hydrogen. So I don't know if it was a grift because we didn't give them anything, but I think business people were chasing it because they thought the feds were going to help.
Well, like a lot of us knew, those of us in the know, we knew there were no off-takers in any country for this particular product, right? And so, I mean, this got a lot of people upset, and especially in Western Newfoundland. I mean, people were worried. They had sleepless nights over this stuff, okay? So, you know, thankfully nothing come of it. But I feel bad for those people on the Port Peninsula that were quite worried about not just their livelihoods, but their traditional way of life. It was a horrible time as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, well, even if Mr. Risley says that the green hydrogen play is no longer reality, it still doesn't mean that if he has any success, whether it be with the full $75 billion worth of spend, the plan still is to use these massive wind turbines to generate power for whoever the customer might be, Hydro-Quebec or whoever. But this is a much different kettle of fish that, I mean, it was hard enough to wrap my mind around the green hydrogen prospects or proposals. This one's way bigger and way more complicated.
Wow. I don't know. I'm just some old guy sitting in Placentia now. and I wonder what's on the mind of these politicians. Like, I mean, shouldn't they be more concerned about, like food insecurity and stuff like that, and trying to figure out what we're doing with all the people that have, such a rough time, like the homeless situation, and people can't afford. It's not that there's not places out there to rent. They just don't have the money to pay the large sums of rent and stuff like that. And I'm not blaming it on the people that rent. They have their costs too. So I don't know why governments are addressing the more immediate concerns rather, like I said, this to me is all a green grift, okay, and much to do about nothing.
Well, alternative sources of energy are not just about all grift. I mean, there's a role for hybrid in power generation. I mean, there really truly is. If you have just one reliance on one source of energy, that's probably not a very good idea. Is there a role for some small wind for domestic use? Maybe. Is there an opportunity in Labrador to use some form of alternative energy on side of hydro to add the power required, say, for expanding the mining industry? Probably. But a firm reliance on one or the other is probably a very bad idea.
Well, I don't mean to sound like somebody out to lunch. And I do agree with you. Yes, we should be looking at alternative sources of energy. Absolutely. I mean, you know, if the world continues, eventually oil is going to run out, right? You know what I mean? So, like, there's, you know, nuclear power, lots of electricity in Newfoundland. I don't know how much we could be selling, you know, to the United States or other provinces and stuff like that. So, you know, but like I said, when I think about what the people on the Port au Port Peninsula were put through, you know, that there was a lot of people had sleepless nights over there, man. They were quite worried about, you know, their traditional ways of life and stuff like that, their livelihoods, you know, especially the fishermen and stuff. Anyway, Patty, I didn't know if you were aware of this new article. You probably are. You seem to be aware of everything else. Just thought I'd put that out there for you today. And
yeah, I spoke to it yesterday and again today. We've had a couple of calls on it already because it's fascinating. And it kind of came out of nowhere. I don't think I'm really too surprised because when Mr. Risley went from green hydrogen to all of a sudden plan B was artificial intelligence data centers, and now we're here. And this whole reimagined Atlantic Loop, there's probably a pretty good reason why it didn't get off the ground the last time, because the provinces were required to get involved were kind of disinterested. Even the federal government, who talked about subsidizing it, they kind of all of a sudden became disinterested. There's probably a good reason why.
Well, just go back from, I watched a documentary a couple of years ago, and it was about the wind industry in Ontario and many lives. So one of the commentators in the documentary said, he said, wind turbines don't run on wind, they run on subsidies. And Patty, with that, I'm going to say Happy New Year to you. And nice to know I can still listen to you down here.
I appreciate your time and thanks for tuning in. Stay in touch.
Okay, thanks, Patty. You have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye, Ken. Yeah, it's obviously on my radar. Like I admitted off the top when I spoke to it in the preamble, I've kind of been thinking probably a little bit too much about it, whether or not it's an actual real thing. And Mr. Risley also references he understands why there's skepticism. Yeah, no doubt about it. But, you know, is this something that's actually possible? That's going to happen? Because remember, for context, phase 1, 10 gigawatts, 5 from Nova Scotia offshore, 5 from wind generated onshore on this island. Then, for additional context, the 150 turbines in phase 1 proposed for the Port au Port Peninsula generates about 1 gigawatt. 5. He's talking about the other proponents being involved in this play. Can you just imagine if you tried to look at a map and draw all of the lines required to interconnect all of those, and then to get that interconnected power off of the island under a subsea cable or through a subsea cable to whoever the customer might be, Hydro-Quebec or otherwise. And Ken also mentioned, you know, American thirst for power. That's real. No doubt about it. Quebec has a bunch of power that they sell into the northeastern United States. One of the New England states, I think it was Connecticut, they signed a 25-year deal at 5 cents a kilowatt hour. But to try to extend their business, they were trying to sell power into Maine. There was a public referendum on transmission towers that needed to be built, and it got shot down. And consequently, that market didn't manifest itself for Hydro-Quebec. Let's get a break for the news. When we come back, there's a caller there to talk about the airport up in Wabush. Don't go away.
The Tim Powers Show. Join the conversation weekday afternoons at 4 p.m. on your VOCM.
Welcome back. Let's go to line number 2. Caller, you're on the air.
Morning, Patty. How are you?
Doing okay. How about you?
I'm all right. Let's have a chat about Wabush Airport.
Okay.
So just before Christmas, they lost a runway again for 3 days, 3.5 days, and this falls right on management's feet. Said there's a zero leadership here, a zero plan implemented, and when a manager only shows up for 2 days out of a month, and she has been here for 3 months, was the longest stretch, something's going to happen, and it's starting to show.
Go ahead and elaborate. Just explain a little further exactly what we're talking about.
So basically what happened here is we had a winter storm. We had a mild temperature, we had some rain, then we had turn cold and snow. So So in the past, what you do is you send your runway crew in. Say if the rain started at 2 o'clock in the morning, you send your runway crew in at 12 to get ready for this rain. Either put chemical down to protect the runway or close the runway and bury the runway in snow to absorb that rain so that you don't lose it. Because we all know when cold rain hits cold asphalt, it's just instantly ice. So there was a zero leadership, a poor planning, and it all falls on the feet of management of not being able to cope with the weather here. It's an incompetency. Said the manager lives in Moncton. She don't know how to deal with the weather here or plan.
Oh, now I'm pretty sure I know who I'm talking with. You're the gentleman who sent me the letter, right?
Correct.
Good. Now I'm just connecting some dots. They're a bit slow here this morning. So wasn't there also a resignation that further complicated this issue?
Yeah, so basically they got notice of somebody's looking into some stuff. They got notice of it and she resigned.
Yeah, so where are we now? Rudderless.
So basically now you're rudderless, and a fly-in, fly-out manager is not going to work here. They need boots on the ground, and as stated in the CARS regulations, a manager has to be on site day to day to monitor airport safety, winter conditions, and implement a winter maintenance plan.
And here we are in the throes of winter. You know, I don't want to derail this conversation, but it also reminds me of some of the concerns about fire and emergency services at the Wabush Airport.
Well, so you look back, was it 3 months ago now, 3.5 months ago, the runway was closed again due to lack of management issue. When an email was sent 2.5 years before, when the town of Lab City was supposed to take over the ARF services to have tires replaced on the fire truck, and to this day, the tires are still not there, and the system is downgraded to a Cat 5 instead of being a Cat 6.
Yeah, and some of that was based on how they calculated passenger flow. I think they only used the regular airline numbers as opposed to the fact that so many fly in and out on a charter.
Yeah, and to this day, they still deny that they had the numbers, but even just past COVID, maybe 6 months outside of COVID, the numbers were over 180,000 again, but they denied it. That wasn't even counting charters. If you want to count charters, this airport is over 350,000.
Which is extremely busy and certainly qualifies for the federal threshold on fire and emergency services.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the threshold is 180,000. They're saying fare-paying passengers, but now how you want to litigate that is a charter flight a fare-paying passenger flight, or is it just a person buying a provincial ticket? Right? It's how you read the wording.
Yeah, because splitting that hair is really the epitome of silliness, because all that really counts is the number of people leaving or departing and arriving at Wabush Airport. The end.
Correct. So it said, regardless of who's paying the bill, it's all fare-paying passengers. If a contract company pays for the full 737, they're still fare-paying passengers.
Makes sense to me. I don't know why that hair is being split. Seems kind of silly, because if we're talking about actual safety of the traveling public, then the numbers are the numbers, and the fire emergency services need to be in place as per the CAT designations.
Yep, as I said, they're back in place now, but due to maintenance issues and not acting on past stuff, the fire truck is still not working, and the one that they sent in from Montreal is a piece of junk that's not even fit to be on the road, really.
Desperate situation. Anything else you'd like to discuss this morning, caller?
No, just keep your ears close to the ground, because I think there's going to be a big inquiry into this issue up here, and it's coming faster than they think.
Well, it sounds like it might be overdue. I appreciate the information. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, buddy.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. I mean, oh man, sometimes I almost have my head scratched off. In addition to that, when we talk about air travel out of Labrador, folks in Labrador were understandably questioning some of the air travel subsidies afforded to travel between St. John's and Gander and Deer Lake, and they were not included, which is, I think, a very justifiable concern. Because when we looked at the average increase of the price of a ticket for the airports here on the island, compared to the increase of the price of a ticket to fly out of Wabush, for instance, it was way out of whack. So if there was any so-called subsidy required, or if anyone thought it was a need, then how Labrador got left out of that particular announcement is certainly a lot to understand. It leaves a lot to understand. Let's get our final break of the morning in. When we come back to another segment of the show left for you. The topic, well, that's up to you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Good morning, Glenn Clark. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy Daly. How are you?
Very well. Thanks for asking. How about yourself?
I'm pretty good. And did you have a good Christmas?
I had a perfectly quiet Christmas, exactly what the doctor ordered. How was yours?
Yes, it was the same way. You know, well, the weather, I guess, was the worst part of it. But you know, when you got your health and strength and you got a few friends and so on, then you know the rest sort of follows along, doesn't it?
Hear, hear. Well said.
Now, Paddy, as I'm sure you know that. Excuse me. That the town of Victoria, all councillors were dismissed back in, sometime, I guess it was it was prior to Christmas, I think. But anyway, Paddy, you know, I'm not going to pretend that I know what went on there, because after, like, I decided not to run in the last election, and for personal reasons, you know, my wife is not not well, and so. But anyway, so I decided not to run. So and I stayed away because give the new council a chance to get their their feet on the ground and and get things moving along. They had a lot to learn, as we know, and whether we liked or whether we didn't like who was elected and so on, then the people did make their choice, and democratically, and on you go. But anyway, the entire council was dismissed for whatever reasons, I don't know, and as I said, I won't speculate because I don't know, other than the rumors and so on that circulated around town and are on social media. As I always say, if you buy your news from social media, then you're paying too much. But anyway, the council was dismissed for whatever went on over there, and I suppose it'll be determined at some point in time. But where I come from, and as I just said, I had 29 years on council. I served on the M&L board. I worked for a federal cabinet minister. I worked for an MHA for so I'm very familiar with with the how things should operate. And I felt, and I still feel, that the council should have never been dismissed. In my humble opinion, I feel that the council, if there's problems over there, and as I said, I don't know, other than what you hear, but in my humble opinion, the council should have been suspended, in my opinion, because, and then if there's an investigation that needs to be done, then carry it out. And then, work with what you have after, whether it's, permanent suspensions or reinstatements or whatever. And because now what's happened now is, first of all, there has to be a general election at some point in time, and the whole council has to be elected. Now, a general election in a municipality, certainly of our size anyway, will require a fair bit of time, and the cost. The cost, I think is probably anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000. When if they had been suspended, and then the investigation done, then if there's somebody, that does have to go or whatever, I don't know. That's something I don't know. And again, I'm not going to speculate or anything like that. But if there was, or if there should be, then the rest of the councillors could have been reinstated, and you have a by-election, and on you go. Now we have an administrator there, and apparently this person is running the daily affairs of the town, because if he's the administrator, then I guess that person replaces the entire council, whatever council duties are, and I'm sure you're familiar with that. and makes all the decisions. And what gets me, what I'd like to know, and I'm sure the residents of Victoria needs to know, how long is this going to last? There's been no estimated time estimate given. There's no cost estimate given, and who is paying this person's salary? Who's paying the expenses? This person is back and forth from St. John's to Victoria on a daily basis. So as you know, that's a significant cost, and plus plus the expenses of meals and so on, and so who ends up paying for that? Is it the province, or is it the government? Or and this is the kind of things that I think that our residents need to know. Our residents have not been informed, to my knowledge, anyway, and they need to know. And I'm surprised actually that this question hasn't been asked before.
Well, I mean, I can only read between the lines because number one, there was no time frame for getting this resolved offered by the minister, and that's Chris Tibbs at this moment in time. But it's a provincial public servant who's acting as the town administrator. One can only assume and hope that the province is picking up the bill because it's the province's action that led to the implementation of this administrator. Number one. Even the conversation itself, apparently the straw that broke the camel's back was at one particular council meeting where there was what they call an improper vote to oust the mayor. Things about conflict of interest and the dysfunctional behaviour of the council. It's not unprecedented, but it really does pose some big questions that you're bringing here. When are we going to see an opportunity for council to be voted on again? Because even Minister Tibbs at the time said it does not prohibit any of the current or the past members of council, including the mayor, to run again. So there's a lot left to be understood.
Now, Paddy, there's a couple of things in that, and and a couple of good points that you made. First of all, at that particular meeting, and again, I wasn't there, so I'm only getting it from people who attended and what was on the evening news, but. And apparently, a councillor made a motion to dismiss the mayor, and I know, that is not legal. It's if you want to dismiss a councillor or whoever, then there is a proper procedure to follow.
Yep.
But which is fine. But. This was a new councillor, and I'm not taking sides with anybody here. I'm just, saying the facts. This councillor made the motion. As I said, a new councillor, and I can only assume, not familiar with the procedures and so on, how things should work. However, there were two people from municipal affairs, senior officials to my knowledge, who were in attendance at the meeting and should have, in my opinion, spoke up and said, Councillor, I'm sorry, but this motion is out of order and cannot be made, cannot be seconded, and cannot be voted on. And that would have resolved, that issue and so on, but they didn't do that. They chose to go back to St. John's. Then the next morning, I think it was by email, dismissed the entire council. So that was the first, I think, mistake by municipal affairs, or I don't know, it was a mistake or a misjudgment, or whatever. And that's what, and that's how I feel about it. What was Paddy? What was the other point to it? That you said about the improper motion that was made, and there was another point, and I lost my train of thought.
I think I just made the other point of if the province is responsible for the council being disbanded and appointed the town administrator themselves, who was actually a pretty senior official in the department, he's the director of municipal support, I think it's called, that I think they're probably footing the bill. I think that's the only points I made.
Yeah, well, we don't know that, do we?
No, we don't.
It hasn't been made. It hasn't been made public, and and I'm not questioning the administrator because I know the person well, and I'm sure he's well he's well qualified to do what he's doing over there. However, people. We're residents of this community. We have 1,700 or 1,800 residents, and we need to be informed. We need to know. And I'm not talking about making, issues and so on public, but, somebody, from government, and it may have to be the minister. I don't know, but he should make some kind of a statement and say, let the residents know where we stand here, because right now people are. I was going to say, the town hall is occupied, but I suppose I won't say that. But where do we stand on this stuff? We need to know.
You absolutely do. And, to that end, it'd be nice for a government to reopen the House of Assembly. And, on so many of these big pressing issues, it's kind of remarkable to me that we've heard very little to nothing from different government ministers on a bunch of the topics that we're talking about on this program, which I think would be helpful if we could get some answers. I'm going to put this on my radar. I'm going to send a note off to the Department of Municipal Affairs asking a couple of quick questions. Who's paying for the administrator and all his expenses? And when can people expect that there will be nominations open to see if we can't get another elected council in place?
Yes, and Paddy, and the other thing I was going to say is, under the existing legislation, and as we know, a new act, came in last year. I think it was on the 1st of January, and so on. Yeah. The old Municipalities Act of 1999 was replaced with the new, Municipal and Local Service District Act. And under the existing legislation, to my knowledge, now I don't know if there's been a special provision made for this situation or what, but under the existing legislation, and I don't know, again, as I haven't even bothered to read the new act since I resigned, or since I didn't run again, but I got a feeling that if you're dismissed from council, then you cannot run in the next election.
But they were clear in saying that it does not preclude the former members of council running for the nomination, which I assume means you can run again. Glenn, just because we cleared 12 o'clock, we'll have to leave it there, but I'll follow up on your behalf and the other residents of Victoria.
All right, and Paddy, I appreciate that, and I look forward to you probably speaking on it at some point in time.
I'll do my best. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thanks for your time, and good health, and take care.
The same to you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye now.
All right, Glenn had the last word. We will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning, right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk again in the morning. Bye-bye.